The hum of the projector is the only sound in the room. It's a low, hungry sound, the kind of noise that eats silence. 23 people are in this glass-walled boardroom on the 47th floor, and all of them are holding their breath. The city sprawls below us, a glittering, indifferent beast, but in here, the world has shrunk to the size of a 10-foot projection screen. My husband, Mark, stands beside it. He looks impeccable as always. His suit is a custom charcoal gray, his silver tie is knotted with surgical precision, and his smile is the one that has sold millions in software and secured billions in funding. It's his apex predator smile. Today, he's using it to gut his business partner, Arthur. He clears his throat, and the sound is unnaturally loud. "And so," he says, his voice booming with false confidence, "the future of Omnicorp isn't just secure. It's revolutionary. And it all begins with Project Nightingale." He clicks the remote. He's expecting a slide with a sleek logo and a 3-year financial projection. He's expecting applause. He's expecting the final, crushing blow to Arthur, who sits opposite me, his face a pale mask of confusion and betrayal. But that's not what appears on the screen. The first image is a screenshot. A text message. Blue bubble, gray bubble. The name at the top is Isabella. The text reads, "He has no idea. The old man is completely in the dark. Nightingale is ours." A collective, sharp intake of breath. The air turns to ice. Mark freezes. His smile doesn't drop, it shatters. It's a horrifying thing to watch, a porcelain mask cracking into 1,000 pieces. His eyes, wide and frantic, dart from the screen to me. I'm sitting at the long mahogany table, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I don't smile. I don't flinch. I just watch him. I meet his gaze, and for the first time in 15 years, he sees me. He truly sees me, and what he sees terrifies him. He clicks the remote again, a frantic, desperate little sound. Click, click, click. The next screenshot appears. A different conversation. "Don't worry about Clara," his text reads. "She's so wrapped up in her little hobbies, she wouldn't notice if the house burned down around her. She's simple." And then another. Isabella's reply. A photo of them. In our bed. Her, tangled in our sheets, smiling at the camera, a glass of champagne in her hand. Him, asleep beside her, his arm draped possessively over her waist. The date stamp is from 3 weeks ago, the night of our anniversary, when he told me he was stuck at the office finalizing the Nightingale proposal. The room is a vacuum. All the sound, all the air, has been sucked out. Mark's face is a ghastly white. A sheen of sweat breaks out on his forehead. He opens his mouth, but no words come out. Just a dry, rasping little gasp. He looks at Arthur. He looks at the board members. He looks back at me. His empire is crumbling in real time, pixel by agonizing pixel. And I am the one who lit the match. The air in that room turned to something solid, something you could choke on. If you've ever felt a moment freeze like that, a single second stretching into an eternity, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me tell these stories, the ones that happen in the quiet spaces behind closed doors. It wasn't always like this. It began, as these things so often do, with a lie so small you could barely see it. Our life, from the outside, was a masterpiece of modern success. We had the sprawling minimalist house with more glass than walls, the his and hers German cars in the garage, the membership to the country club we never used. We were a photograph in a magazine, glossy and perfect and unreal. Mark was the architect of this life, the brilliant, charismatic CEO of Omnicorp, a tech firm he'd built from the ground up with his college friend, Arthur. I was the silent partner in the marriage, the supportive wife. My name wasn't on the letterhead, but my fingerprints were everywhere. I was the one who managed the home that served as his sanctuary and his corporate entertaining space. I was the one who remembered the birthdays of his investors' children. I was the one who proofread his late-night emails and proposals, catching the typos and grammatical errors his exhausted mind missed. I was the one who gave up my own promising career in archival research to make sure his runway was always clear for takeoff. I did it gladly. I believed in him. I believed in us. We were a team. Or so I thought. My world was quiet. While he conquered boardrooms, I found solace in the forgotten corners of the world. My passion was restoring old things, tattered books, faded photographs, antique maps. I loved the patience it required, the delicate work of piecing together something broken and making it whole again. There was a story in the fragility, a history in the water stains and torn edges. I would spend hours in my home studio, the scent of old paper and bookbinders glue my constant companion. I'd trace the faded ink of 100-year-old letter, imagining the life of the person who wrote it. It was my escape, my small pocket of the universe that was entirely mine. Mark called it my little hobby. He'd say it with an affectionate, slightly patronizing smile. Clara and her dusty old papers. He'd tell our friends at dinner parties. Keeps her busy, they would laugh, and I would smile, a tight, polite little smile that didn't reach my eyes. I never corrected him. I never told him that my hobby required more research, precision, and historical knowledge than his last 3 software rollouts combined. I never told him that in my world, I wasn't just a supportive wife. I was a respected expert, consulted by universities and private collectors. I kept my world separate. It was safer that way. The first crack in our perfect facade appeared on a Tuesday. It was raining, a relentless, dreary downpour that matched the slow-growing unease in my heart. For months, things had been off. He was more distant than usual, his phone a permanent extension of his hand. He'd laugh at a text, and when I'd ask what was funny, he'd just shake his head. Work stuff. You'd be bored. He started working later, traveling more for emergency meetings. The space between us in our king-sized bed had grown into a vast, cold canyon. That Tuesday, he left his phone on the kitchen island while he took a shower. It was a rare oversight. Usually, it was guarded like a state secret. It lit up, and I glanced over, my heart giving a painful little lurch. A text message. The name was Isabella. The preview on the lock screen read, "Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you." The world tilted on its axis. The sleek, minimalist kitchen with its marble countertops and stainless steel appliances suddenly felt like a cage. I could hear the shower running upstairs, the steady beat of the water a mocking rhythm to my own frantic pulse. My hands were shaking. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the screen, my mind a war zone of denial and sickening certainty. Don't look. If you look, it becomes real. If you look, you can never unsee it. But I had to know. I unlocked it. His passcode was our anniversary. The irony was a bitter pill. There it was. Not just one text, but months of them. A whole secret life laid bare in glowing pixels. There were intimate conversations, shared jokes that I wasn't a part of, plans for secret meetings. There were photos. Her mostly. Selfies sent from a desk I recognized as being at his office. A picture of a hotel room key. A snapshot of 2 wine glasses on a table, her hand intertwined with his. It was a brutal, systematic dismantling of our 15 years together. I felt the air leave my lungs. I sank onto one of the bar stools, the cold metal a shock against my skin. Every loving word he had ever said to me turned to ash in my memory. Every shared moment felt tainted, a scene from a play where I was the only one who didn't know my lines were part of a tragedy. The sound of the shower stopped. Panic seized me. I locked the phone and placed it exactly where I'd found it, face down. I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans. He came downstairs a few minutes later, wrapped in a plush white towel, his hair damp. He smiled at me, a casual, easy smile that made my stomach churn. "Morning," he said, kissing the top of my head as he reached for the coffee machine. "Big day today. We're finally pitching Nightingale to the board." Nightingale, his passion project. The revolutionary new software he claimed would change the industry. He had spent the last 6 months consumed by it, working late nights, taking hushed calls. I had been his sounding board, his editor, his cheerleader. I had believed in it as much as he did. Now, seeing that name, I wondered what else it represented. I couldn't hold it in. The betrayal was a physical thing, a shard of glass in my throat. My voice, when it came out, was a thin, reedy whisper. "Who's Isabella?" He didn't even flinch. He turned from the coffee machine, a look of mild confusion on his face. "Isabella? She's a new junior analyst on the Nightingale team. Very bright. Why?" "You're texting her," I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. "A lot." He sighed, a long, weary sound, as if I were a particularly trying child. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. It was a posture of condescending patience. "Clara, we've talked about this. My team is working around the clock. We communicate constantly. It's part of the job." "Last night was incredible," I quoted, the words tasting like poison. "Can't stop thinking about you." For the first time, a flicker of something annoyance? Fear crossed his face. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by that same patronizing calm. He walked over to me and took my hands. His were warm. Mine were ice cold. "Honey," he said, his voice dropping to a low, soothing tone. The voice he used to close deals. The voice he used to calm nervous investors. "It's an inside joke. Her presentation last night was a huge success. She was nervous, and I was coaching her through it. She's just being appreciative. You're reading way too much into this." He was so good, so plausible. For a split second, I almost believed him. The desire to believe him was a powerful, seductive force. It offered a return to the comfortable fiction of our life. "It's just a text, Clara," he said, squeezing my hands. "It's nothing. You're being hysterical." Hysterical. That word. He'd used it before, anytime my emotions became inconvenient for him. When I was upset that he missed my father's funeral for a critical meeting in Zurich. When I cried after he forgot our anniversary for the third year in a row. It was his weapon of choice, a verbal tranquilizer dart designed to invalidate and dismiss. To make me question my own perception of reality. But this time it didn't work. This time, I had seen the proof. I had seen the photographs. I pulled my hands away from his. "It's not just a text, Mark," I said, my voice flat and cold. "And I am not hysterical." He stared at me, his mask of concern finally slipping to reveal the raw irritation beneath.
"Fine," he snapped.
"You want to be paranoid, be paranoid. I don't have time for this. I have a company to run." He turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the cavernous kitchen. The smell of brewing coffee filled the air, a scent I used to love, a scent that now seemed cloying and false. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the big, empty house pressing in on me.
He thought he had won.
He thought he had shut me down. He thought I would retreat back into my world of dusty papers and quiet compliance. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. He had underestimated the patience and precision of an archivist. And an archivist, I was learning, knows exactly how to dig up a story that someone wants to keep buried. In the days that followed, I tried to be the person he wanted me to be, the person I had been. I tried to swallow the poison of his betrayal and pretend it was just a bad dream. I wanted to save us. The 15 years we had built, the shared history, the inside jokes that no one else would understand. I couldn't just let it all go. It felt like tearing off a limb. So, I played the part of the slightly insecure but ultimately trusting wife. "You're right," I told him one evening, my voice carefully modulated.
"I'm sorry."
The pressure of the Nightingale launch must be getting to me. I was out of line. He visibly relaxed. The tension that had been coiled in his shoulders for days seemed to melt away. He pulled me into a hug, his relief palpable. "It's okay, honey," he murmured into my hair. "I get it. It's a stressful time for both of us. Once this is over, we'll take that trip to Tuscany we've always talked about." Another promise. Another future dangled in front of me, like a carrot. I let myself be held, my body stiff and unresponsive in his arms. I felt like a spy in my own life, gathering intelligence from behind enemy lines. I suggested couples counseling. He agreed readily, saying it was a proactive step to strengthen our communication. We went to one session. He was charming, articulate, and completely convincing. He spoke of his devotion to me, his stress from work, and his desire to reconnect. He painted me as a fragile, loving wife who was understandably worried by his long hours. The therapist, a kind-eyed woman in her 50s, nodded sympathetically. I sat there, a silent statue, letting him weave his narrative. I knew then that there was no us to save. There was only him and his performance. I started looking for more. Not to confront him with not anymore. This was for me. I needed to understand the full scope of the rot. But he was smart. He had been careless once, but he wouldn't be again. His phone was now permanently locked down. He cleared his browser history nightly. He was a fortress. But every fortress has a crack. I started small. I began paying closer attention to the finances. I had always handled the household budget, but he managed the larger investments and his personal accounts. He gave me an allowance, a generous one, transferred into our joint account every month. It was enough to run the house, manage my studio expenses, and live comfortably. I had never felt the need to question it. Now I saw it for what it was, a gilded cage. A way to keep me comfortable and incurious. I logged into our shared credit card account. I scrolled through months of statements, my eyes scanning for anything out of the ordinary. It was mostly business dinners at expensive restaurants, flights, hotels. All plausible. But then I saw it. A recurring charge, once a month, for the past 8 months. A florist. A very expensive one, located in a neighborhood near his office. I knew for a fact that he hadn't bought me flowers in at least 5 years. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was such a small thing, a digital breadcrumb. But it was proof. Then there was a charge from a place called the Azure Lounge, a cocktail bar in a boutique hotel downtown. I Googled it. It was dimly lit, intimate, known for its privacy. We had never been there. The charge was from a Thursday night 3 weeks ago, a night he told me he was working late with Arthur, hashing out the final details of the Nightingale Code. I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. He wasn't just lying to me. He was using his best friend as a cover. I tried to act normal. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I made him dinner. I asked about his day. I smiled and nodded as he talked about market projections and shareholder meetings. Every word felt like a lie. I felt like I was losing my mind, living in a parallel reality where only I could see the truth. The strain was immense. I stopped sleeping. I lost weight. The reflection in the mirror was a stranger, a pale, haunted woman with dark circles under her eyes. One of our friends, a woman named Sarah whom I had known for a decade, pulled me aside at a charity gala. She placed a perfectly manicured hand on my arm, her expression a mask of practiced concern. "Clara, honey, are you okay? You look exhausted." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to shatter the polite facade of the evening and show them all the ugly truth. But I looked past her and saw Mark, laughing with a group of investors, his arm casually draped around the shoulders of a striking brunette. Isabella. I hadn't realized she would be here. She was even more beautiful in person. Young, ambitious, with a sharp, intelligent spark in her eyes. The kind of woman I used to be. The kind of woman he had once claimed to love. My throat closed up. I turned back to Sarah, forcing a weak smile. "Just stressed," I managed to say. "Mark's been working so hard on this new launch." Sarah's eyes softened with pity. It was pity, I realized, not empathy. "I know, sweetie. But you have to be careful not to smother him. Men like Mark, they need their space. Especially when they're under pressure. Don't be that needy wife. He's a good man. Don't push him away." The condescension was breathtaking. The casual, ingrained sexism of it all. It was my job to manage his stress, to give him space, to not be needy. His infidelity, if she even suspected it, would somehow be my fault. I had failed in my duties as the supportive, non-smothering wife. In that moment, I realized I was utterly alone. He hadn't just isolated me in our marriage, He had poisoned the well of our social circle, painting me as the slightly unstable, demanding wife, so that when the time came, no one would be on my side. I excused myself and went to the ladies' room. I locked myself in a stall and leaned my forehead against the cold marble, trying to breathe. The sound of the party, the music, the laughter, felt a million miles away. I wasn't just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my sanity. He was erasing me bit by bit and convincing everyone, including me, that I was the one holding the eraser. The challenges kept mounting, each one a new brick in the wall he was building between us. He became more brazen, more dismissive. My questions were no longer met with placating lies, but with cold irritation. He started using a new cologne, a sharp, woody scent that was nothing like the one I'd bought him for Christmas. When I mentioned it, he shrugged. It was a gift from a client. He came home one night with a faint scratch on his neck, high up near his collar. He claimed he'd cut himself shaving, but it was thin and red, the unmistakable mark of a fingernail. I was living in a state of high alert, my senses dialed up to an unbearable degree. I became an expert in microexpressions, in the subtle shift in his tone of voice, in the way he angled his body away from me when he was on his phone. This constant vigilance was exhausting. It was a full-time job being the detective in my own life. My studio, my sanctuary of old paper and quiet contemplation, became my war room. I couldn't focus on my restoration work. The delicate task of mending a torn page felt pointless when my own life was ripping at the seams. Instead, I turned my archival skills to a new subject, my husband. I started a new file. Not a physical one, but a secure, encrypted folder on a dedicated hard drive. I called it Project Nightingale, a little piece of bitter irony that only I would understand. In it, I began to build a case. I downloaded the credit card statements with a florist and the Azure Lounge highlighted. I took a photo of the scratch on his neck while he was sleeping. I made a note of the date, the time, and his flimsy excuse. It was a pathetic collection of circumstantial evidence, the kind of thing he could easily explain away. It wasn't enough. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. The opportunity came unexpectedly. Mark was invited to a tech conference in Singapore. A 3-day trip. He packed his bag with an almost giddy excitement. "This is it, Clara," he said, zipping his suitcase. "I'm giving the keynote. This is where we introduce Nightingale to the world stage." He was so caught up in his own impending glory that his guard was down. The night he left, the house was unnervingly quiet. The silence was a physical presence, pressing in on me. For a moment, I was tempted to just let it go. To pour a glass of wine, put on a movie, and pretend. Pretend I was just a wife whose husband was away on business. But the gnawing uncertainty was worse than the truth, whatever it might be. His home office, a sleek space of chrome and black leather, was usually off-limits. But now it was just a room. His laptop was on the desk, closed. I knew it would be password protected. His main computer, however, the large desktop he used for more intensive work, was humming quietly in sleep mode. I touched the mouse, and the screen blinked to life. It asked for a password. My heart sank. I tried the usual things. Our anniversary. My birthday. His birthday. The dog's name. Nothing. I sat back in his ridiculously expensive ergonomic chair, defeated. What would he use? Something meaningful to him. Something that made him feel powerful. I thought about the man I had married and the man he had become. Arrogant. Triumphant. I typed in a word. Nightingale. The screen unlocked. I felt a jolt, a mixture of triumph and nausea. I was in. For a moment, I just stared at his desktop, a clean, organized grid of folders and icons. Omnicorp. Investments. Personal. Where would he hide it? He was too smart to have a folder labeled Isabella. I started with his email. I searched her name. Hundreds of results popped up. Most were professional, CCNG, a dozen other people on the Nightingale team. I scrolled through them, my eyes blurring. It was all corporate jargon and technical specs. Maybe he really was telling the truth. Maybe I was crazy. And then I saw it, a separate folder, tucked away under a submenu. The folder was named Logistics, an innocuous, boring name. I clicked on it. It was an archive of their entire relationship, hundreds of emails, not from his work account, but from a private Gmail address I'd never seen before. He'd been forwarding them to his work email and filing them away, an act of supreme arrogance. He wanted to keep trophies of his conquest. I started reading, and the world fell away. The lies were so much more intricate, so much more cruel than I could have ever imagined. They weren't just having an affair. They were building a life on the ashes of mine. They talked about the future, about when he would finally leave the ball and chain. That was me. I was the ball and chain. They mocked my hobbies, my friends, my clothes. I saw my entire life, my entire identity, reduced to a punchline in their sordid little romance. She asked about the flowers. One of his emails read. I told her they were for a client's wife. She's so trusting, it's almost sad. Almost, Isabella replied. Don't go soft on me now, handsome. Remember the plan. The plan. What plan? I kept scrolling, my hands shaking so badly I could barely control the mouse. I found emails discussing finances. He had been diverting funds from Omnicorp into a private account. Not a huge amount, just enough to be written off as travel and entertainment expenses. He was building a nest egg for his new life with her. And then I found the heart of it, the core of the deception. It was a thread of emails about Project Nightingale. I saw drafts of the proposal, lines of code, marketing strategies. And woven throughout were ideas, phrases, and concepts that I recognized with a sickening jolt. They were mine. Over the past year, during our dinners on long drives, I had talked to him about my work. I had told him about the archival systems I was designing for University Library, a new method of cross-referencing and data mining that could find connections between seemingly unrelated documents. I was excited about it, passionate. He had listened, nodding, asking intelligent questions. He had encouraged me, telling me I was brilliant. And he had stolen it. He had taken the core concept of my archival system and applied it to his tech world. He had repackaged my life's work, my intellectual property, and named it Nightingale. The name itself was a cruel joke. The Nightingale, known for its beautiful song. He had stolen my song and was passing it off as his own. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it went beyond infidelity. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had plundered my mind. He had strip-mined my soul for parts he could sell. The supportive wife, the silent partner, it was all a lie. I wasn't his partner. I was his resource. An unpaid consultant he happened to be married to. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the monitor illuminating the tears streaming down my face. But the tears weren't just for my broken heart. They were tears of rage. The grief that had been choking me for months began to burn away, replaced by something cold and hard and clear. The switch flipped. The part of me that wanted to save our marriage died a quiet, unceremonious death. The part of me that wanted to save myself rose from the ashes. This was no longer about a cheating husband. This was about a thief. He hadn't just stolen a few ideas. He had stolen my future. He was about to stand on a world stage and take credit for my brilliance, while I was supposed to sit in the audience and applaud. I stopped crying. I took a deep, steadying breath. My mind, usually filled with the gentle, patient thoughts of a restorer, was now razor-sharp. I was no longer a victim in this story. I was an archivist, and I had just found the primary source documents. I knew exactly what to do with them. I began to methodically download everything. Every email, every attachment, every financial record. I created a timeline, cross-referencing texts with credit card statements, emails with travel itineraries. I was building a new archive. Not one of faded letters and forgotten histories, but one of cold, hard, irrefutable proof. He thought my world was small and dusty. He was about to find out that nothing is more dangerous than a woman who knows how to read the fine print. The days while Mark was in Singapore were a blur of cold fury and meticulous planning. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My studio transformed completely. The delicate tools for book restoration were pushed aside, replaced by my own laptop, a burner phone, and stacks of printed documents. The comforting scent of old paper was replaced by the sterile smell of toner and the low hum of technology. I was no longer piecing together the past. I was assembling the future. His future. And it was going to be a bleak one. The sheer scale of his deception was breathtaking. The stolen ideas for Nightingale were just the beginning. As I delved deeper into the files I'd downloaded from his computer, a much uglier picture began to emerge. He wasn't just betraying me. He was planning to betray Arthur, his business partner and best friend of 20 years. The logistics folder contained more than just love letters. It held a detailed plan codenamed Operation Decouple. It was a step-by-step strategy to systematically devalue Arthur's stake in the company, force him out, and install Isabella in his place as chief operating officer. They had been working on this for months. They had created false reports showing poor performance in the departments Arthur managed. They had rerouted lucrative client inquiries away from him, making it seem like his division was failing. They were poisoning the well, turning key board members against him with whispers and carefully manufactured evidence of his incompetence. The final move was to be the Nightingale launch. The project was so revolutionary, so potentially profitable, that its success would give Mark absolute control. He would present it as his sole creation, the product of his singular genius, conveniently ignoring the foundational work done by Arthur's teams and, of course, the intellectual property he'd stolen from me. The board, dazzled by the projected profits, would give him anything he wanted, including Arthur's head on a platter. I felt a pang of sympathy for Arthur. He was a good man. A kind, decent, slightly naive man who trusted his best friend implicitly. He had been the best man at our wedding. He and his wife, Emily, were our closest friends. We had vacationed together. Our children had grown up together. And Mark was about to gut him, without a second thought. This changed everything. My quest for personal justice now felt bigger. It was about protecting an innocent person, about stopping a complete corporate takeover built on a foundation of lies. But as I dug deeper, the crisis became my own again, in a way I hadn't anticipated. I found a subfolder within Operation Decouple. It was labeled Contingency C. The C, I knew, with a sickening certainty, stood for Clara. It was a file containing his plans for our divorce. He had already consulted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the most ruthless, aggressive divorce attorney in the city. The file contained a detailed strategy to paint me as mentally unstable. He had been documenting my hysterical outbursts, my paranoid accusations. He was building a case to prove I was emotionally unfit, which would allow him to contest our prenuptial agreement and leave me with next to nothing. He was going to take my home, my financial security, and my reputation. He was going to erase me from the life I had helped him build, and then he was going to erase my contributions to his success from the history books. I felt a wave of despair so profound it almost buckled my knees. He had thought of everything. He had all the power, all the money, all the influence. I was just a woman with a broken heart and a folder of screenshots. What could I possibly do against a man like that? He would bury me in legal fees. He would discredit me. He would turn everyone against me. He had already started with Sarah. I collapsed into my chair, the weight of it all crushing me. All seemed lost. He was going to win. He was going to walk away with everything, the company, the money, the woman, my ideas, and I would be left with nothing but the rubble of our life. I looked around my studio, at the tools of my trade. The delicate knives, the fine brushes, the conservation glue. They were tools for mending, for preserving. But what do you do when something is so rotten, so consumed by decay, that it can't be saved? You don't mend it. You document its collapse. And that's when I saw it, tucked away in a box of my old graduate school papers. It was my thesis, a thick, bound volume that represented 2 years of my life. The title was Archival Intelligence, a New Paradigm for Cross-Referential Data Retrieval. It was the blueprint for Nightingale. It was the work he had stolen. And on the second page, clear as day, was the official university seal and a copyright notice. Dated 7 years ago. The despair vanished, replaced by a surge of adrenaline so powerful it made my hands stop shaking. He hadn't just stolen my casual dinner conversation ideas. He had stolen my copyrighted academic work. He had been so arrogant, so dismissive of my little hobby, that it never occurred to him that I might have formalized my research. He had never bothered to read my thesis. He had only listened enough to cherry-pick the profitable concepts. He had committed intellectual property theft on a massive scale. And I had the proof. This was the smoking gun. This was more than a messy divorce or a corporate backstabbing. This was fraud. It was a crime. It was the one thing he couldn't gaslight his way out of. I stood up, my spine straight for the first time in months. The decision was made. This was no longer about exposing an affair. It was about taking back what was mine. My work. My life. My name. I picked up the phone. Not my phone, but the burner phone I had bought. I found Arthur's number. My finger hovered over the call button. This was the point of no return. Once I made this call, the carefully constructed world of Clara and Mark Henderson would cease to exist. A part of me mourned it, the beautiful lie I had lived for so long. But the woman I was becoming knew that some things have to burn to the ground to make way for new growth. I pressed the button. It rang twice. Arthur speaking, his voice was tired, stressed. He was a man who knew something was wrong, but couldn't figure out what. Arthur, I said, my own voice steady and clear. It's Clara. We need to talk. Not on this line. Meet me in 1 hour. The coffee shop on Elm. Come alone. And for God's sake, leave your phone at the office. There was a pause. I could hear his confusion, his hesitation. Clara? Is everything all right? No, I said, a cold certainty ringing in my voice. But it's about to be. I know about Operation Decouple, and I have the key to stopping it. I hung up before he could reply. The game had changed. He thought he was playing chess, sacrificing his queen to take the king. He never realized his queen was the one controlling the whole board. Arthur showed up at the coffee shop looking like a ghost. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. He slid into the booth opposite me, glancing around nervously as if he expected Mark to burst in at any moment. Clara, what is this? He whispered, his voice hoarse. Operation Decouple? What are you talking about? I didn't say a word. I simply slid a thin file folder across the table. It contained just 3 pieces of paper. The first was an email from Mark to Isabella, outlining the final stages of the plan to oust Arthur. The second was a fabricated performance review full of lies about Arthur's department. The third was a financial document showing the funds Mark had been secretly diverting. Arthur read them, his face going from pale to ashen. The color drained from his lips. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a dawning horror and a profound, heartbreaking sadness. This wasn't just a business partner. This was the man he'd known since they were 18. I don't understand, he stammered, his hands shaking as he pushed the papers back toward me.
Why?
Why would he do this? Because he's not the man you think he is, I said softly. He's not the man I thought he was either. For the next hour, I laid it all out. I told him everything. The affair with Isabella, the gaslighting, the lies. And then I told him about Nightingale. I showed him the title page of my copyrighted thesis and then a page from Mark's Nightingale proposal. The core concepts, the language, even some of the diagrams, they were identical. Arthur stared at the 2 documents, his mind struggling to process the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. He had dedicated the last 20 years of his life to building Omnicorp alongside Mark. He had trusted him with his livelihood, his future, his friendship. He stole it. Arthur breathed, the words catching in his throat. He stole your work. He stole everything. I corrected him. And tomorrow, at the 10 a.m. board meeting, he's going to use it to steal the rest of the company from you. A fire I had never seen before kindled in Arthur's eyes. The hurt and confusion were still there, but now they were overlaid with a hard, cold anger. The naive college friend was gone, replaced by a CEO whose company was under attack. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. And so, we made a plan. A plan born of two different kinds of betrayal, forged in a quiet coffee shop over lukewarm cups of coffee. It was precise. It was ruthless. And it was beautiful in its simplicity. We weren't just going to stop him. We were going to let him walk right into the trap he had set for others. We were going to let him stand on the biggest stage of his life and self-destruct in the most public way imaginable. The next morning, I walked into the Omnicorp building. I had never been to a board meeting before. I was the wife, the silent partner, kept separate from this world of glass and steel. But today, I belonged here. I was dressed in a simple, dark gray sheath dress, my hair pulled back in a severe bun. I looked severe. I felt like a blade. The receptionist looked up, surprised to see me. "Mrs. Henderson, can I help you?" "I'm here for the board meeting," I said, my voice calm. "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have you on the list." Right on cue, Arthur appeared from the hallway. "It's all right, Susan. She's with me." He gave me a small, tight nod. The plan was in motion. We walked into the boardroom together. The air was thick with anticipation. The board members, a collection of stern-faced men and women in expensive suits, were already seated. Isabella was there, sitting slightly behind Mark's empty chair, a smug, proprietary look on her face. She saw me and her eyes widened in surprise, a flicker of annoyance crossing her features. She clearly thought I had come to make a scene, to have a tearful, embarrassing confrontation. She underestimated me. Everyone did. Mark strode in a moment later, radiating confidence. He was at the absolute peak of his power, and he knew it. He saw me sitting next to Arthur, and his confident stride faltered for just a fraction of a second. A deep V formed between his eyebrows. He was annoyed by my presence, but not alarmed. In his mind, I was a nuisance, a minor domestic problem that had unfortunately spilled into his professional life. He shot me a look that was pure venom, a silent command to leave. I held his gaze, my expression unreadable. He plastered on his CEO's smile and took his place at the head of the table. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice smooth as silk. "Thank you for being here. Today is a historic day for Omnicorp. Today, we unveil the future." He launched into his presentation. He was a master showman, weaving a compelling narrative of innovation and market dominance. He spoke of the company's challenges, subtly laying the blame on the departments Arthur managed. He built the tension, the drama. And then he arrived at his grand finale. "And the solution," he said, his voice dropping to a dramatic hush, "the engine that will drive our growth for the next decade is Project Nightingale." He gestured to the screen, a triumphant smile on his face. He clicked the remote. This was my cue. The night before, Arthur had given me access to the presentation software. While Mark slept on a plane, dreaming of his victory, I had been in his system. I had replaced his meticulously crafted slideshow with a new one. My own little restoration project. The first image appeared on the screen. Not the Nightingale logo, but the screenshot of his text to Isabella. "He has no idea. The old man is completely in the dark. Nightingale is ours." The silence in the room was absolute. It was a physical thing, a heavy blanket that smothered all sound. Mark's triumphant smile froze, then cracked. His eyes darted from the screen to Arthur, then to me. The raw panic in them was a thing to behold. He fumbled with the remote, his hand shaking.
Click, click.
The next slide came up. The picture of Isabella in our bed. A wave of quiet gasps rippled around the table. One of the board members, an older woman named Eleanor, looked at me with an expression of profound pity. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible shake of my head. I didn't need her pity.
Click.
The next slide. An email detailing their plan to falsify Arthur's performance reports. Arthur, playing his part perfectly, slammed his hand on the table. "What is this, Mark? What the hell is this?" Mark was hyperventilating now. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his face the color of chalk. This is fake," he stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. This is doctored. She's trying to ruin me. He pointed a shaking finger at me. All eyes turned to me. I remained perfectly still. Is it fake, Mark? I asked, my voice cutting through the tension. Is my graduate thesis fake, too?
Click.
The final slide. A side-by-side comparison. On the left, a scanned page from my copyrighted thesis from 7 years ago. On the right, the corresponding page from his Nightingale proposal. The text was nearly identical. The diagrams were the same. The theft was laid bare for all to see, undeniable and absolute. The room erupted. It was a controlled chaos of angry whispers and shocked exclamations. The board members were looking at Mark not with disappointment, but with the cold fury of people who've been lied to, whose investments have been threatened by the reckless ego of one man. Mark stared at the screen, at the proof of his ultimate crime. He looked at me, his eyes begging, pleading. But the woman he was pleading with was gone. He had destroyed her. He opened his mouth to speak, to lie, to explain away the inexplicable. But no sound came out. His face contorted in a mask of agony. His body swayed. And then, with a strangled cry, he collapsed. He hit the floor with a heavy, final thud. For a moment, nobody moved. The sight of this titan of industry, this master of the universe, lying in a heap on the floor was too shocking to process. Isabella was the first to react, rushing to his side, but the board members just stared, their faces hard and unforgiving. Arthur stood up, his voice ringing with newfound authority. "Security," he said, speaking to the intercom on the table. "We have a medical emergency in the main boardroom. And please escort Ms. Bullis from the building. Her employment at Omnicorp is terminated, effective immediately." Isabella looked up, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. But when she saw the cold, unified expressions of the board, she knew it was over. Security guards arrived and helped a dazed, trembling Mark to his feet, leading him out of the room like a common criminal. Another guard took Isabella by the arm. She shot me a look of pure hatred as she was led away. I felt nothing. When they were gone, an unnerving quiet fell over the room. All eyes were now on me and Arthur. Arthur cleared his throat. "Well," he said, with a masterful understatement, "it appears our presentation on Project Nightingale needs a new introduction." He looked at me, a question in his eyes. This was the moment, the culmination of our plan. Eleanor, the senior board member, spoke first. "Mr. Henderson's actions are inexcusable, but the project itself, the projections were astounding. It would be a catastrophic loss to abandon it." "We have no intention of abandoning it," Arthur said firmly. But Mark was not the mind behind it. "As you have just seen, the core intellectual property for Nightingale was stolen." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle in the room. "It was stolen from its true creator, who has graciously agreed to help us move forward." He gestured to me. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, allow me to introduce you to Dr. Clara Stevenson, the architect of Nightingale." He used my maiden name, the name I hadn't used in 15 years, the name of the brilliant young academic with a promising future. Hearing it spoken in this room, in this context, felt like a resurrection. I stood up. I was terrified. My heart was pounding, my palms were sweating. But I thought of the years of being dismissed, of being called simple, of my work being called a little hobby, and my fear was burned away by a cold, righteous fire. "The version of Nightingale that Mr. Henderson presented," I began, my voice clear and steady, "is a pale imitation of its true potential. He stole the engine, but he didn't understand the schematics. What I can offer you is not just a piece of software. It is an entirely new way of thinking about data. And it is all mine. I didn't just get revenge that day. I didn't just expose a cheating husband. I took back my name. I took back my work. I took his entire future and claimed it as my own." He thought he was collapsing our marriage. He had no idea he was launching my career. The aftermath was a storm. A whirlwind of lawyers, press releases, and frantic damage control. Mark's collapse in the boardroom was officially reported as a stress-related health incident. He was granted an indefinite leave of absence from which he would never return. His separation from the company was quiet and brutal. He left with a fraction of what he thought he was owed, his reputation in the industry shattered beyond repair. No one wanted to be associated with a man who would not only betray his partner and wife, but also commit blatant intellectual property fraud. The divorce was surprisingly swift. Faced with the mountain of evidence I had compiled, his high-powered attorney advised him to settle, and settle quickly. He signed the papers without a fight. I got the house, a significant portion of his assets, and most importantly, the legal and financial control over the Nightingale project. He was forced to sign over all rights, his name permanently scrubbed from its history. He became a footnote in his own story. I saw him one last time, across a polished table in a lawyer's office. He looked diminished. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed weariness. The custom-tailored suit hung on him, as if he had shrunk. He didn't look at me. He just signed the papers, his hand moving mechanically across the page. The man who had commanded boardrooms and dazzled investors couldn't even meet my eyes. There was no grand confrontation, no final, cutting words. There was just the quiet scratch of a pen, signing our 15 years away. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction. I just felt quiet. It was the quiet of a house after a storm has passed, the stillness in the air when the danger is finally over. Moving forward was harder than I expected. Taking the helm of Nightingale at Omnicorp, now as Chief Innovation Officer, was daunting. The first few weeks were a trial by fire. I could feel the skepticism from some of the board members and the senior staff. I was the wife, the outsider. What did I know about running a multi-billion-dollar tech project? There were moments of crippling self-doubt. I would sit in my new office, Mark's old office, with its panoramic view of the city, and feel like an imposter. I was an archivist, a restorer of old things. What was I doing here, in this world of aggressive growth and quarterly reports? But then I would dive into the work, and the doubts would fade. The code, the algorithms, the data structures, this was my language. I understood the architecture of Nightingale on a foundational level that Mark never could have. I started working with the development teams, and they quickly realized that I wasn't just a figurehead. I knew my stuff. I could see the flaws in Mark's implementation, the shortcuts he had taken. I began to rebuild it, to refine it, to make it what it was always meant to be. Arthur was my rock. Our friendship, forged in the crucible of betrayal, became a true partnership. He handled the business side, shielding me from the corporate politics, while I focused on the project itself. We worked together, a team built on mutual respect and a shared desire to see Omnicorp not just survive, but thrive. 6 months after the boardroom showdown, we launched the real Nightingale. It was a staggering success. It exceeded every projection, revolutionized the industry just as I had promised, and sent Omnicorp's stock value into the stratosphere. My name, Dr. Clara Stevenson, was on the patent. My face was in tech journals and business magazines. I was no longer the silent partner. My voice was heard. I sold the big glass house. It held too many ghosts. I bought a smaller place, a restored brownstone with a garden and a proper library. I filled it with books and art and things that I loved. I built a new studio, better than the old one, and on the weekends, I still lost myself in the delicate work of restoring old maps and forgotten letters. I needed that quiet, that connection to the past. It grounded me. It reminded me of who I was before I became Mrs. Mark Henderson and who I was becoming now. I sometimes wonder what happened to him. I hear whispers now and then that he moved to another country, trying to start over. That Isabella left him as soon as the money dried up. I don't feel anger towards him anymore. I don't feel much of anything. He is like a figure in a faded photograph I once restored, a part of a history that is no longer mine. He took so much from me, but in the end, he gave me the greatest gift of all, myself. He pushed me so far that I had no choice but to find a strength I never knew I possessed. My life isn't a fairy tale. The scars of his betrayal are still there, thin white lines on my heart. There's a part of me that will always be more cautious, more guarded. but my life is my own. It is a life I built not on the foundation of someone else's success, but on the bedrock of my own intellect, my own resilience, and my own work. I sit in my office now, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation. The corner office. My corner office. On my desk is a small, framed photograph. It's not of a person. It's a picture of a page from a medieval manuscript, one I restored years ago. The script is faded, but the illustration is of a nightingale, its beak open in song. It's a reminder that even after the longest, darkest silence, you can always find your voice again. And when you do, you sing. It wasn't a victory that felt like a celebration. It felt like breathing again after holding your breath for a decade. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. And thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.